Couldn't we just cater to the good people in society and say F everybody else?
Here's what I want you guys to think about. You got the criminal justice system so broken that even the Republicans admit it. How do we use that to get some folk home?
We are focused on bipartisan criminal justice reform.
CNN political commentator Van Jones is teaming up with an unlikely ally to fight for prison reform.
I'm not interested in meeting with conservatives. That's like a thing that you have really picked up, which I think is a very interesting strategy.
So for me, this fight is personal, like many of you.
The First Step Act, a measure that could let thousands of people out of federal prisons earlier.
It is too hot for some on the right, too cool for some on the left.
Every time someone like you sits with someone like him, you give him validation.
I ain't going into the Trump White House. Like, nah.
I'm literally living a nightmare where the only people who will go are the people you know damn well shouldn't go.
Could you talk a little bit about how the idea for this film came together and what you were trying to do with it?
The way this film started is, we had made a web series with Van called The Messy Truth in the lead up to the 2016 election. Van was on CNN having these fierce debates with conservatives on the air, and we basically came up with this idea to film a documentary series where Van went into the homes of Trump supporters and had dialogue with them in their homes, modeling how to have some sense of civility across these dividing lines. That project wound up being the seeds of this feature film, The First Step. So out of that, Trump got elected. We had just worked with Van on this series about bridge building. We had known Van for many years, and he sat down with Lance and I and basically said he's going to spend the next 4 years under this administration, the Trump administration, doing everything he could to work across the aisle and try to engage and try to get something done on criminal justice reform, on the addiction crisis, on these issues where maybe there was some give for bipartisan action. And he knew that a lot of his colleagues were going to be fighting this administration tooth and nail for the next 4 years. He felt like that was really important work to be done, resisting and fighting the fights where there was disagreement. But he wanted to be one of the people that was trying to find engagement and common ground. And Lance and I, as filmmakers, felt that he was about to walk into the lion's den and try something that almost no one else was trying at that time. And we felt, whether he succeeded or not, at this point, there was no bill. He didn't know Jared Kushner. None of the story that you see in the film existed. He was more so just setting out on this bipartisan journey. And Lance and I felt a deep concern about the polarization in the country and felt that no matter what, there would be an important story to be told that the public could learn from.
I guess there's a lot of surprises, but what were some of the biggest surprises for both of you coming in without any of that at the beginning as you went along on this journey?
I grew up in the DC area, been here, lived in this city for most of my life. And even as somebody who lives here, I also was very cynical about Washington and felt like nothing could get accomplished in this city, and felt that the polarization was so extreme and the bureaucracy was so thick that you can't really make progress. I had a front row seat to seeing what it actually looks like to pass a bill, to have it have Republican support, Democrat support, which you need right now in this moment in time, to have the president sign it. I was there with people like Louis L. Reed, Jessica Jackson, Topeka Sam, advocates who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. We filmed and I was there as they walked into the halls of Congress, sat down with senators and Congress people on both sides of the aisle, shared how the criminal justice system impacted their lives and their families' lives. Those conversations made their way into a literal bill, a piece of paper that was changed and marked up. And that piece of paper was debated, deliberated, discussed, and eventually passed the House, passed the Senate, and was signed by none other than the law and order president, Donald Trump, who was no friend to criminal justice reform until this moment. So The biggest surprise to me was that I got to see the legislative process actually work. And then I got to spend time with all these people who came home from, multiple decade sentences, reunite with their families. And I got to see the human impact of this legislation on real people's lives. So in a moment of a lot of cynicism and negativity around Washington and politics, I actually walked away from my experience making this film hopeful.
I hope there's a sequel, by the way, of all those people that had their lives changed by this bill, because I would be really curious the next time anybody brings up, the downside to the bill, what it really meant to a lot of people.
Jenny, the sequel is what we're doing right now, because we're bringing the film to theaters all across the country with people who have been directly impacted by the criminal justice system, including a lot of people who have been released from the First Step Act. So what's the kind of amazing thing is that the people who are impacted by this bill are the ones that are sharing the film in their communities.
And Lance, as a producer, you're responsible for helping get everybody in the door of the White House, of all these rooms where the deals are made, and all the other places. I was amazed watching that we could sort of peek over your shoulder into for both of you. What was some of the challenges of that part of the story?
I feel like it's not a hyperbole to say that every frame of this film was there was a fight for almost every frame of the film, or it was just like hard earned. In a sense, whether it was earning someone's trust, the access, just spending time and building a relationship with someone. I mean, nothing in a sense with this film came easy. And in some ways, believe it or not, it was easier to film in the Trump White House than it was to film in some of the community settings. Even, you have to remember that, Brandon could tell this story too, but when we first went to West Virginia to build some of the relationships with West Virginia grassroots leaders, the level of distrust towards the media and also just people who weren't from West Virginia was so intense that literally when Brandon walked in the door of the sheriff's office in West Virginia in McDowell County, on the whiteboard behind him said in big letters, "The media does not define us." To then, begin to build some kind of relationship to be able to spend this kind of extended and also very intimate time, with people and sharing their personal stories and be with them through these really vulnerable moments. That's just in West Virginia. And then on the flip side, in DC, we were on the phone with, White House counsel, having conversations about what we intended to film and explaining very transparently what our intentions were. This is not a gotcha film. There were no hidden cameras. We didn't walk through the side door, we went through the front door. So this was all it was very important to us to be very transparent and clear about what we were trying to do, who we were, why we thought it was important to document this story, to tell it honestly. There was no prior review also. So it wasn't like we said as a precondition for filming that this is our film, it's an independent film. We can't submit anything to any elected officials or administration to review in advance. So we have to be able to tell this story in an honest way. And I think in a lot of respects, because there was trust between the advocates who were fighting for the bill, then in a sense, because then the advocates had built that trust, and then the advocates trusted us, that helped us to also be in the room and not be perhaps as suspect. But a lot of times we only have a very limited window too. Sometimes you only have 10 minutes to be in a space. So you got to also just be really, really efficient. Like what could be captured in this space of, 5 or 10 minutes.
If it's life versus criticism, I will walk proudly into the White House and save someone's life.
Even Kardashian said it the best was, if it's going to save a life, I'm going to walk in there with a smile on my face. How important was it for you to, as a movie, make it sort of bipartisan as well? Like that there was equal sides to the story.
Very important. we're setting out to make a film about bridge building, and our protagonist was Van and Lewis and Jessica and their group, and I mean the West Virginia LA coalition as well. But so the film has a central protagonist and a point of view, but when we set out to tell the story, we made it really clear to Van, Lewis, Jessica, everyone that was in the film, that we want to try to tell this story in a way that is very balanced, that is very honest, and that allows people from a very diverse set of backgrounds, political persuasions, race, geography, to engage with the story and trust it. And so you've got Patrisse Cullors, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, is in the film. And that wasn't, we didn't just it wasn't a gotcha moment. We built a relationship with her and her team. She participated in being in the film. You also have Rand Paul and Jared Kushner and Senator Mike Lee and Donald Trump himself are all in the film as well. So there's really prominent leaders on both sides of the aisle who are in the film. I think everyone is given a very fair and balanced portrayal, or that's what we sought to do. Right. We had people in our team from a variety of backgrounds that were helping us really make sure that we were telling that story in an honest and balanced way. And the amazing thing in the release of the film, we've toured with the film to almost 30 states across the country at 40 different film festivals, some really red communities, some very blue, and some purple. And the amazing thing is the film has resonated across lots of different audiences because of the way the film was made. Because conservative audiences can sit there and they can watch and they see people that they respect, and they see that they're given a fair portrayal. And then, progressive audiences can see people that they respect given a fair portrayal. So everyone that sits in the film, I think, everyone who sits through the film has been able to trust it, but then also be challenged to empathize and connect with a perspective that is not their own. And that's the hope with the film, to break down some of the barriers just a little bit.
Do you feel like I'm not doing a good job listening?
Not at this moment.
What every one of you showed us is something that we'll take back and use every day.
You cannot help people at mass with one party, with one race. The only way you're going to help is you get everybody together.